from Texas, but he's right behind the Texas fans, and they have given him the business. Keith.
I'll bet. Jamal Charles is in the backfield with Young. Charles gets the ball, cuts back into the middle, and finds some daylight. He is a speedster, and he is gone. No flag. 80 yards.
Eli Stein's the snapper, Reed Bowers the holder, and here is Cam Little to take the lead for the Hogs. It hit the top and rains down into the end zone.
And welcome everyone to Lone Star Yell Fight, where we're talking all things college football, Texas Aggies, Texas Longhorns, from the greatest country in these United States. All right, everybody. Good morning, football fans. This is Jim Christopher from Lone Star Yell Fight. We've got Andy Tom Chesson, the world's favorite Aggie. Andy, first of all, how are you feeling about the Aggies this weekend? Last weekend, that was about as dominant a performance as I've seen all season against a number 9 opponent. The thing Jessica and I noticed when we were watching the game was y'all's offense was beating them so bad that they played so back at some point that there weren't even cornerbacks in the frame sometimes.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that it's probably the most complete win that the A&M program has had in 4 years, certainly since the 2020 season. And there may have been a game or two here or there, but nothing consistent, nothing that you feel like you could build upon. Just, there might have been a fluke here that they played well. But this was what feels like, and I'm cautious about this because I've been burned so many times, it feels like they're actually improving as the season goes on, which is such a bizarre change for us that I don't even know how to put it, because we did a number of years with Sumlin where we'd start 5-1, 6-1, and then proceed to tank most of October and November. And then Jimbo, the last couple of years, just couldn't win games, period. Didn't matter what time of year it was. So it really was just a culmination of the offense played well, the defense played well, special teams played well. We had a guy punt to the 1 and make it dance down the goal line until it went out of bounds. Hunters aren't supposed to be able to do that. And I assume he's some sort of mutant, and Xavier will be recruiting him for his school of gifted youngsters. Because that's the only way you explain that punt. And I'm excited about a punt. I mean, you're excited about a punt. No, I think, it's really great to see Connor Wegman back. That's the Connor Wegman that we were hoping to see this season. We didn't see him against Notre Dame. And there's probably a number of reasons for that, because of nerves, because of missing the season, because of wanting it too bad, I think, and maybe playing a little bit hurt. Don't know exactly when he got hurt. I'm sure other people do. And as good as Marcel Reed has been for the 3 games that he played and getting us to, a 4-1 record before heading into Missouri, he's limited in what he could do at this point in his development curve. He's not a downfield passer at this point. Connor Wegman is a downfield passer, and he runs. Now, he doesn't run like Johnny Manziel ran. He doesn't run like Vince Young runs, but he runs enough that he can get you a first down when he needs to. And he's not necessarily slow. Still would like him to learn to slide, but that's, nitpicking. But yeah, it was it's really exciting when all 3 aspects of your football team play well at the same time, with what was a top 10 opponent coming into your home stadium. And they were done by the first quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. They weren't prepared for any of that. It was fascinating to watch. And then you look at A&M's schedule going forward, and all of a sudden it's a very winnable schedule until the last game of the season. So has your outlook on the schedule changed?
Again, this is where the caution and the history of being an A&M fan will kick back in. I'm not terrified, not afraid, but I'm cautious about going into Starkville next week. Shouldn't be. Mississippi State is a horrible team, but it's a tough place for us to play in the last couple of years. I'm hoping that Elko has this team prepared to go in and take care of business. If you can do that, LSU is a winnable game. That'd be a tough game, but it is at home. It's a winnable game. And despite what your LSU fans, sorry, Brian, will tell you, the home team in that series has won, I think, the last 6 or 7 games in a row. So you feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
South Carolina on the road could be tough, should win that game. Auburn's kind of the same way. They may have shut down by that point. And so we will, and then New Mexico State or whichever directional school we're playing for that odd week. But you do have a very winnable schedule that you should be favored in. And I think we are favored in every game to that point before the last game of the season. And we can talk about that, but there is a world. I'm not predicting this. I'm not calling it. I don't want to jinx it, but there is a world where Texas and Texas A&M are playing for the SEC champion, the SEC places in the SEC championship game, and then turning around the next week and playing in Atlanta.
That's crazy. I wondered too how much the aspect of the game. Obviously, we have plenty of time to get there, but a lot of my other Aggie friends had sort of pitched A&M beating Texas because of kind of playing over their skis for the season. But in this point, though, if things stay the way they are, Texas is going to see A&M coming, and I don't think there'll be a surprise for anybody.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see how the matchup works. And I think, honestly, and we're going to transition to the Red River rivalry in just a second. But this is going to be kind of an interesting barometer because I think you guys are stepping up in competition. Regardless of what you think about you, I think they still have a decent defense. So it'll be a good challenge for your offense, especially with Quinn Ewers coming back because he's been named the starter for the game tomorrow or today. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Georgia will be another step up in defense after that. I think those are two very winnable games for you, but it's going to be two of the more difficult games on your schedule, and then you kind of coast in. What is interesting, Kentucky's playing really well defensively. I think you still score more points than anybody else on your schedule, and the last game of the season notwithstanding. But Kentucky's playing well, and they play good defense. Vanderbilt. Who knew Vanderbilt was going to, play football? And I don't know if they shot every bullet in their gun against Alabama, if they did, good for them. But all of a sudden, that looks like a more interesting game. Still a game Texas should win, but it's more interesting. And then you've got Arkansas, who, again, is all of a sudden playing well and plays good defense. And so it's going to be a really interesting kind of rest of the season for you. Certainly, the second half is going to be harder than the first half was. Mm-hmm. I still am of the belief, not appealing or appeasing to you, that Texas's offense is better than the defenses they're about to face. But it is a step up in competition, so we'll see how Sark and his team react and respond to all that. But yeah, for to put a bow on the first half of the A&M season, if you would have told me 5-1 at the beginning of the year going into the bye, I would have taken it 9 times out of 10. It's unfortunate the way the Notre Dame game played out, but I think if those two teams played again today, it would be a different outcome. I do really see A&M making progress week over week, which is something we haven't been able to say in College Station in a really long time.
Yeah. Before we do jump into this coming week in Texas OU and the Red River Shootout, I'm still calling it the shootout. I don't care. Let's talk a little Vandy and Bama, though. Nothing about that game was a fluke, though. Vanderbilt really actually controlled Alabama on both sides of the ball. They made plays when they needed to. It wasn't like a bunch of weird plays happened and all of a sudden Vandy came out with a win. I mean, they looked really, really good, and it made for the best SEC shorts ever where Vandy didn't speak. And that was the best thing. That was amazing.
Well, I think that the Commodores had a definite plan of attack, and that plan of attack was to keep the ball away from Alabama as much as they possibly could. I think time of possession ended up being 42 minutes for Vanderbilt to like 17, almost 18 minutes for Alabama. And it's hard to score points if you only have the ball 18 minutes. To Alabama's credit, it was a 5-point game or 4-point game by the end, but the Commodores did. I mean, it's a day where everything went right for them, and they played well. It wasn't a lot of, like you say, fluky plays. It wasn't a lot of tip ball drills that worked out in Vanderbilt's favor. It wasn't a heavy turnover game. It was just Vanderbilt had a game plan and they executed it. And that's really boring, but it's how it worked out. And I would say, the same thing happened a little bit later with Arkansas, Tennessee. Tennessee should have wiped the floor with Arkansas, but Arkansas kept the ball away from Tennessee's offense. They took away the long pass and came up with that upset too. It is one of the things that makes college football really, really interesting, that you do have these games that pop up, and it seems to happen in clusters where it's 1 or 2 weekends a year where it's just the top 10, half of them get wiped out.
Yeah, and no, I think to your point, it looked like Vanderbilt basically borrowed essentially the same plan that Mississippi State tried against Texas, where they kept the ball away from Texas, and then you have a young quarterback who I think tried to make stuff happen as opposed to taking what came. And that's, I think, why that game was closer in the first half than it should have been. This weekend, I think it's the best rivalry in sports. I think it's one of the most hated rivalries in sports for sure. Mostly because we also have a state rivalry of Texas versus Oklahoma, but the Red River Shootout is back, and
but Jim, this year it's going to mean more, right?
well, it'll even mean even more than it's meant. Apparently, I don't know. It's meant a whole hell of a lot. I mean,
but now because it's in the SEC,
even more.
It just means more, Jim.
Yeah. No, I mean, you hear a lot of players that play for other schools that are like covering the game, and it's an environment you don't see. Stadium split half and half. I never understood though why we always have to come in through the Oklahoma side. That's one thing I've always disliked. But am I crazy to feel? I've seen this game go 100 different ways. I feel like though in the last let's say 10 years, this feels like the biggest separation of talent between the two teams, with Texas, I think, looking just a lot better than Oklahoma.
Yeah, I don't think you're crazy. I think Oklahoma's injuries are certainly playing into that, though, to an extent. I think Texas has recruited better than Oklahoma has for how long has Sark been there? 3 years.
Yeah,
this is year 4. He's recruited better than Venables and whoever was there before Venables. I don't remember. There's more talent. You compound that with the fact that I think Oklahoma has 6 or 7 wide receivers that aren't going to play, or at least didn't play 2 weeks ago. We'll see what happens when they show up this afternoon. But yeah, there's not the skill talent, and I think some of that is just you lose the guy who went to the left coast to go coach USC. He took all your offensive talent with you if you're Oklahoma. And he actively recruits against you, which is interesting. So he's locked down. Oklahoma used to do a really good job of pulling skill players out of California. And whatever you think of Lincoln Riley, he's a good recruiter and has managed to not only keep those kids in California, but actively go after players that Oklahoma would have normally.
No. He's such a snake, man. And I know it's the job, but he's such a snake. Like, I don't know. I hate that guy so much.
But yeah, I think to your point, Texas has better defensive talent. They certainly have better skill talent. You've got a better offensive line. I don't know if Bert Auburn is better than whoever Oklahoma's kicker is. Maybe that's Bert Auburn certainly has a better name. Bert Auburn has the kind of name that you would expect that Andy would have come up with on Parks and Rec.
Yeah, like it's a fake FBI identity.
Yes.
Yeah. The one thing that gives me pause is, and I think it actually worked in Texas's favor that he played last week, is they did change the quarterback, and this guy's a little bit more of a RPO kind of guy, and sometimes that can give problems to Texas, and especially if it makes Oklahoma lean into their run game, because I think Texas's strength really and truly is in pass protection or pass defense. Anything you think we should worry about there?
I think because of the injuries to the receiving core and the newness of a quarterback, it's not a great matchup for Oklahoma offense to your defense. So I would expect that Oklahoma is going to try to run the ball as much as possible and create as much confusion with an RPO game. So the danger is, can your defensive line and your linebackers recognize that and snuff it out early? It kind of demoralize the Oklahoma side of the game. The hesitation you hear, and the hesitation I would have with this game just for the last 20 years, is that even when there's a giant talent disparity, and it's worked both ways, the this game is always one where somebody comes out of nowhere and has the game of their life. It is a rivalry game, and as much as that's a cliche, this is one of the series that seems to make that cliche a real thing, where you have outcomes that you don't expect and wouldn't have been able to predict because one team gets on a heater for 48 minutes.
Yeah.
We saw it when
I'm reminded of 2008 when they flexed Jordan Shipley to basically a tight end spot for the first time in his career, and Oklahoma had no idea what to do.
Hey, did Jordan Shipley have a bass boat?
He did, and I think he was a roommate with his quarterback, and their dads were roommates too. Oh my God, that's
a great story. We should talk about it every year for the next 20 years.
And Juan Soto's 21, so
yeah, this is again on paper. I think Texas wins this game. I think it is a step up in competition, but it is that rivalry game where you just don't know what the outcome is going to be because something weird is going to happen. You don't know if it's going to be Quinn Ewers having a slow first quarter on his first start back in 3 games and wait until the second quarter to start playing well. That's happened in this series before.
Yeah.
You don't know if a freshman quarterback from Oklahoma who you've got limited tape on is going to play out of his mind and never be heard from again. That's happened in this series. You don't know if the running game is going to be able to overcome Texas defensive line and linebacker, where I think there is still a giant talent disparity. You don't know that with the secondary that Texas has, Oklahoma won't figure out how to pass the ball. It's just there's so much that's there, and we'll probably be saying the same kind of things about Texas and A&M at the end of the season because that passion can carry you through a game. It can't carry you through a season, but it can carry you through a game.
Unlike baseball, that passion can carry you through in football.
Right. So it's that's still hurts. You know?
No, I wasn't making that comment. I was more making the comment of all of our, for people that are watching that also watch our Astros show, for all of our fans saying there's not enough fight in the team. That doesn't translate in baseball, whereas in football it does. I wasn't making a comment about that whole thing. That was actually not even in my mind.
The fact that the Astros aren't playing, it still hurts. That's what I was saying.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the other thing that still hurts baseball related. See, now look what I've done. I made it awkward. I didn't mean to.
At least I'm not having to show you on the doll where I was touched.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's funny because one of the things I don't like though, Andy, is moving the game to 2:30. I almost don't like it from an annoyance perspective. I want my college football to either be at 11 or 6 or 7. 2:30 just sort of takes up your whole day.
Well, I think this is one of the things that we get used to in this new world of the SEC and the exclusivity of ESPN or ABC on ESPN or whatever you want to call it. ESPN on ABC, I guess is the right term. But that conglomerate considers 2:30 their prime game of the week. That's where they put it. You've come from a world where Fox Sports said 11 a.m. is our big game of the week, and that's where we're going to put the Red River rivalry shootout, whatever you want to call it. Again, stop changing the fucking name. And if you ask the fans, they all want to play night games because they have time to get all liquored up, watch the other games, and then go to a stadium and be as rowdy as they want to. And now in Texas, that it's not going to be 95 degrees, at least for a couple of days. You want to sit out there and have a beer or have 8 beers and be in a dark stadium and yell with your 70,000, 80,000 of your closest compatriots.
Let me just tell you, that is the last thing this rivalry game needs is a bunch of hammered students and hammered rednecks,
Well, I think it's, how much crime do you want spilling out of the stadium into the state fair?
Well, I was wondering, though, a little history fact before we get into picking some games. Did you know that the toothbrush was invented in Oklahoma? Anywhere else would have been called a teeth brush.
Today's joke from 1902 brought to you by...
Oh, I got a better one. What does a tornado and a divorce in Oklahoma have in common?
What?
Someone's losing a trailer. That's good, right?
You're going to put a rim shot in this in post.
Oh, yes. I'm totally putting the rim shot in. So we thought we'd be picking some games. One of the more fun parts about this part of the season, particularly if your baseball team's not playing. All right, South Carolina, Alabama. Alabama, I imagine he's going to rebound pretty big, right? Or do you think Alabama can get bit twice?
I would take Alabama on that. It would surprise me greatly if Alabama doesn't rebound and rebound strong and rebound like they've got something to prove. And it is one of the really interesting things that we'll be talking about the second half of the season and for football teams. Losing a game in this new world of 12 playoff spots doesn't ruin your season. Matter of fact, losing one game doesn't have any effect on your season. There's going to be nothing. That 12 team field is going to be nothing but 12-1 teams or 11-1 teams. So Alabama still has their entire season to play for. Everything's in front of them. South Carolina is struggling with injuries. They are a very one-dimensional team offensively, and I don't think that they're going to be able to consistently run against Alabama's front. I think Jalen Milroe has a bounce-back game. Alabama should win pretty handily.
I wanted to dive in now to one of the all-time Big Ten matchups, classic football, and that's going to be Penn State at USC. USC, are they struggling more than you expected? Considering, I mean, it does seem like Lincoln Riley has all the talent in the world in Southern California, and he's not putting together a good product.
Well, I think the thing with the California schools is coming from the Pac-12, 16, 18, whatever they are, Pac-2, I guess right now, it's just not competitive football. And I know Washington had a great run last year and made it to the national championship game, and good for them.
I remember that.
But yeah, I know you do. But that was a very top-heavy league, and they were very much an outlier. The rest of the teams kind of play kind of a Peter principle thing. It's none of them are great, but you don't see them because they don't play until 10 o'clock at night every week. So I think a lot of them get by on this idea of name recognition and USC being a blue blood if you go back 50 years and count and ignore the last 20. I just think USC has stepped up in competition. I don't think they play defense well enough to stick with Big Ten schools. And that's saying something because the Big Ten's not exactly known for their innovative offensive games outside of maybe Ohio State. Having said that, we're about at the time of the year where Penn State starts falling down and dropping games that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think Penn State pulls this out. USC is just not good this year, and even though it is in Los Angeles at the Coliseum, I don't know that there's much of a home field advantage there for USC because, frankly, nobody goes to those games.
Yeah, strippers and beer for everybody afterward. Ole Miss, LSU. Ole Miss got bit last week. Did they get bit again?
This one's tough. What time is the game? It's at night. LSU night game at LSU is a different animal. Kind of to your point.
The conversation earlier about people being drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, that's exactly right, and it is an intimidating place to play. It is a hard place to play because you have 95,000 drunk coon-ass Cajuns just in it. They'll throw things at you, and every story that's made up about what happened to Texas Tech actually happens at LSU as far as batteries, whiskey bottles, and feces on your bus. Lane Kiffin has a problem. He does not play well. His teams do not play well against top 10 teams, and LSU is right on the border of that at 13 right now. Going into Death Valley, I would take LSU on this, but I think it'll be close.
Brian Kelly, I think both of us, when he got hired by LSU, felt like that was a weird fit. And he even, faked a Southern accent for a little bit just to try to fit in. Is that working, do you think?
What you mean, he doesn't talk like Foghorn Leghorn normally?
He, in fact, does not talk like Foghorn Leghorn. So, I mean, do you think that thing's working, or do you think Brian Kelly's going to begin to start having a warmer seat?
The LSU faithful is not exactly known for their patience. There are schools where if you had won a national championship, you would kind of get to stay there until you graduated. Maybe that's not as true in 2024 as it would have been in 1974. but Les Miles was pretty much run out. And Ogeron was run out, and probably for good reasons, but again, national championship winning coaches don't last long there. Kelly hasn't won an SEC championship, much less a national championship, and hasn't had them in contention for one. I think the patience starts running out for what they're paying him. The fact that his teams don't play really good defense, and that's something LSU likes.
Yeah.
They will live with subpar offense if they're winning games, if the defense is good. They have enough talent in that recruiting base to always have a good defense, and somehow they don't play good defense. It's one of the things that makes me hopeful for the matchup in a couple of weeks in Kyle Field with LSU. That's the one thing I could say about Ole Miss. If they can overcome the road stadium and that atmosphere, I don't know that LSU could stop them from passing the ball down the field. Having said that, Ole Miss tends to not do well. So Brian Kelly, back to your question, it's not this year, but I think if they're not in contention for the SEC championship game next year, that becomes a problem for him, and that becomes a problem for Woodward and the brass at LSU in regards to who's our next football coach going to be.
Too bad Mike the Tiger can't actually get out there and coach. All right, last one game that's on.
I nominate Brian Arbor. He's on sabbatical right now. Anyway,
he's got time. He's got nothing but time. All right, Texas OU. Texas is gonna be the road team, which means they're gonna wear the Stormtrooper whites, which gets me a little.
Which you prefer?
Which I do prefer. Yeah. They've started calling them the icy whites. I'm assuming Disney made a phone call after they bought Star Wars and said no more Stormtrooper whites for you guys.
Question about that before we get into the game. So one of the interesting things about Twitter and these two fan bases, meaning A&M and Texas, trying to rekindle the rivalry amongst the Gen Z fans. That's mostly who I see on Twitter talking about this stuff. Evidently, Texas fans feel that they own the all-white uniform. So a white helmet, white jersey, white pants. That's because that's been historically your road uniform. A&M had all-white uniforms against Florida, and that caused somewhat of an uproar that, like putting Texas Aggies on our baseball uniforms, we're somehow trying to be the University of Texas or fool people into thinking that we're the University of Texas because we don't have A&M somewhere on our jersey.
Right.
And so evidently this is the next level of that. Texas owns white uniforms, so Texas A&M is trying to be Texas by wearing a white uniform. Where do you fall down on that kind of stuff?
I thought a lot of teams had the white uniform.
They did.
I mean, I don't. I prefer it to. I wouldn't even say I necessarily prefer it to the burnt orange. I just think it looks slick with all the little tripped out pieces of orange. But no, I don't really wrap myself up in whether either everybody copies everybody or nobody copies anybody. But there's all kinds of things that, unless you're the Texas Rangers trying to just borrow the thing they do in Yankee Stadium without even trying to hide it, everybody's influencing everybody. I don't really wrap myself up into what other teams are doing when it comes to that stuff.
What if you make up a mythical creature like a panther and an eagle and call it a peagle and pretend that's part of history?
Well, then, yeah, there's that too. I'd like to see that now. That'd be kind of neat.
Well, take a look at the City Cadets for the Texas Rangers next time
Yeah.
Up there.
Oh. Yeah. Those are the.
No, it's one of the interesting things that there is a subset of Texas fans that are very consumed with can't wear white uniforms. Nobody should have a block T because we own the block T and we own the letter T just at all. So don't put that on your uniforms. And there's idiocy on the A&M side too. So it's interesting because we haven't had to hear a lot about it, but now that we're going to play each other in football, it's coming back.
I will say I think I'm agreeing to the core of your point though, that some of it feels a little forced. This like the shit talking that we're seeing on X and stuff, because again, it's people that are way younger than us who I don't think care about sports as much as our generation did, and all of it seems a little. The shit talking feels a little silly right now to me, particularly over whether or not you can wear a white uniform. And here's what I know about the University of Texas. They are a litigious institution. If they really did own the block T or the white uniforms, believe me, there would be some lawsuits out there. There aren't, so they don't. There you go. Where do you see the
All
score
right,
of
so
this game, though?
back to the game.
Yeah, I've got Texas 35-14. That's kind of how I'm feeling. Your thoughts?
Um, I think Texas wins. I think it's slightly closer, but every time I've said that, Texas has scored a lot more points than I was going to give credit for. I do think Texas's offense is superior in just about every way to Oklahoma's defense, even though Oklahoma's defense is the strong suit of their team, which doesn't say much for their hopes on Saturday.
Yeah.
So I've got Texas by 10 to 12. But I'm also not a gambling degenerate, so you should not use anything you hear about a point spread from me on this show as betting advice.
Totally. Yeah, and also too, I mean, people, I think because they talk about the Texas offense and how dynamic it is, they're sleep on the defense, which is also very, very good. So hopefully, as you know, you've known me long enough to know this is always the game I want. This is it. I don't know if it's because I was stuck in Oklahoma in the Army for so long and I'm just mad that I had to be there, or if I've hung out with too many Oklahoma filmmakers who think they can drink a lot of beer because it's 3% up there. But there's a lot going on in my rage against this team.
So if you had to choose between being stationed in Oklahoma or going to the military installation in Leavenworth in Kansas, just a little bit north of that, knowing what that installation is, which one would it be?
Which side of the wall am I on in Kansas?
I would take either for this comparison.
Yeah. And the weird thing is that Fort Sill itself is actually one of the nicer bases to live on, but you're still in Oklahoma and all that entails. And, they walk around with such a hair up their ass about everything that they think they're better on about the state of Texas. And I do think it's sort of, I think what bothers people is, one, I think a lot of people on the outside don't realize that Texas is actually a very large and metropolitan state, right? We have two of the biggest cities in the country, really three if you look at San Antonio. And I think a lot of these other states just want to prove these, like Oklahoma wants to prove that they're somehow equal or better to Texas. And I think they get mad that we don't really care the same thing. We're more interested in competing with other things. Not them. It's like the Texas Tech rivalry.
Now, I will say the other side of that is that I was in Denton last weekend because my daughter goes to school in Denton, and got a little bit too close to the 35 South going north or 35 East going north, because that's a thing.
That's a thing. Yeah.
That said Oklahoma City X amount of miles away. It's like, that's too close.
It is too close. All right. Well, we're going to be back next week. We'll be previewing A&M's next game, hopefully wrapping up a Texas win. Andy, any final thoughts on this week before we get out of here?
Well, I'm glad we're done with these silly bye weeks because it just screws up everybody's schedule and nobody likes them. It should be another good game of college football, although it's going to be tough to top last weekend with the amount of upsets and everything. So looking for some fun stuff, and the weather's nice, so go to a college football game. Go sit in the stadium. Yeah. Enjoy life. Enjoy fall.
We're going to sit on our back patio and watch the game. All right, for Andy Tom Chesson, I am Jim Christopher. This has been Lone Star Yell Fight. We will see you next week. Enjoy the ball games.